What's up, my fellow SMITE players? My name is JTM Josh12, aka Salty Scooter, and welcome to the first episode of the revival of Know Your Enemy. Know Your Enemy was a show made by Hi-Rez a few years back, which was mostly a guide for new players, with also a few advanced player tips to play certain gods. And because the show helped me out so much when I was beginning, I thought I would return the favor by reviving the show to help out the new players. So today, we'll be talking about the god of the Nile, Sobek. So how this show works is that we're going to look at a specific god in SMITE, we're going to see what he does in general, and we're going to look at his abilities, and then we're going to see how we can play against those abilities and what Sobek players do, so you can try to avoid those. So who is Sobek and what does he do? Sobek is an Egyptian guardian in SMITE. He's one of the original gods, so most of his abilities are pretty basic. He's played best as a support role, but can also be played in the solo. His main focus revolves around defense, peeling for his teammates, initiating fights, and putting people out of position. He has decent damage, but that's not really why you play him. So let's start off by looking at Sobek's passive Blessing of the Nile. Each time Sobek hits an enemy, so either a god, a minion, or a jungle camp, he actually gains protections, for a max of 3 stacks, and each stack gives him 10 protections, so a max of 30. This is also indicated right above his avatar, and also by the armor that shines on his back. The brighter it gets, the more protections he has. Every single time he hits an enemy god again, it renews the stacks. A thing to note is that even though some of his abilities hit more than one god, each ability can only proc 1 stack. So his first ability is called Charge Prey, and this is basically Sobek's bread and butter and what most people know him for. So what it basically does is that Sobek dashes in a straight line, and if he hits an enemy, he basically yeets them behind him into oblivion. Now this is the perfect ability to throw enemies into terrible positions, either in his tower or straight into his team. During his dash, he is also knock-up immune, so things like FG, Savannah's Ode, Oedic's 3 and so on. And a lesser known fact is that at the end of his dash, if he hits an enemy, he's actually CC immune for a short amount of time. So if you play this right, you could potentially CC immune an Ares or CC immune a Ymir freeze. His second ability is called Tail Whip. Sobek whips around in a circle, knocking up enemies and doing damage. Now even though it doesn't do that much damage, it can still be a pretty good ability to disrupt the enemy team, making it harder for them to follow up with their damage. Sobek can also move while he's using his 2. So he could potentially cast it and at the very last second of the animation still knock somebody up. His third ability is called Sickening Strike, and this is Sobek's main ability, which you will probably level up first. He strikes in front of him in a cone, dealing damage and healing him, and he can hit up to 3 enemies to heal him. Of course this is subject to change, but right now at level 1, every single time he hits an enemy he heals for 30 HP. So he can heal up for 90 HP at level 1, which is an insane amount right now. This ability also applies a 50% healing reduction, making him a good counter against healers, and also in the early game because it does counteract potions. And this is also going to be Sobek's main ability for clearing and of course for poke. See, until now it's a pretty simple kit. His ult might get a little more complicated, but still on the simple side. So it's called Lurking Waters, and what it basically does is that Sobek submerges into the ground, gaining 30% protections, CC immunity, it slows all enemies in the radius, and he gains 10% of his mana back every single second. At the end of the 4 seconds, or by cancelling ability early, Sobek emerges, damaging all enemies in the radius. And if he pops up earlier than the 4 seconds, it will reduce the damage. If you are using this guide to learn how to play Sobek, I'm going to go over some of his ability living orders and some of the combos that he uses. At level 1, you want to level up his 3 because of the damage that it gives you and because of the heal. You don't want to level his 2 because it disperses the minions, so it's harder for your ADC to clear the wave. At level 2, it doesn't really matter what you level, either your 1 or your 2. You would level your 1 if you think there's an opportunity for a pluck to kill the enemy, and the 2 just for the extra damage to clear the minions. I prefer having the 1 because it also gives the extra escape opportunity. After that, at level 3, you will probably want to level up your 2 just so you can have all the abilities for that CC, for your combos, and so on. After that, the ability leveling order is going to be your 3, your ult or your 2. I like leveling up the ult first because of the slow that it gives and because of the damage. So either the ult or the 2, and then at last your 1. The 1 last because it is an escape, and because leveling up escapes isn't usually the best in Smite. So I'm not going to go into item builds this series because I feel like items and the meta keep on changing, so it wouldn't really do anything if I did give you one. I am, however, going to recommend a few things that you can do and where you can look. So first of all, there's a few websites that do show builds and that can help. I'm going to leave those in the description, but I just keep away from the community ones and just stick with the streamers and the YouTuber ones. Next point is just, there's a bunch of YouTube videos out there that constantly update their builds, and those are usually great. And then you can also look at the SBL. They usually have the top tier builds, but you just gotta be careful because a lot of their builds are situational to their games. So I just look at a few of their videos and see what, like, in general they're building. Sobek doesn't really have that many combos, and like most of them are related to his 1. So his first combo is that you pluck the enemy, and then you hit him with the 2 so he can't escape, and then if he does escape, you hit him with the 3. The second one is basically the same thing, just in the air, you hit him with the 3, and then the 2. This does increase your damage output, but it gives him a higher opportunity to escape because of the delay of the 2. And then the last one is just the same thing, and then you just chase him down with your ult when they escape. So let's jump right into the mechanics of Sobek and what you might see Sobek players do. So my first tip would be beware of fighting him early in the minion wave due to his health and protection. So his passive and his 3 are especially good in the early game. Having those 30 extra protections definitely help tanking the wave. His 3 will also heal him for 90 health if he hits 3 enemies, minions included, which is roughly about 10% of his health. So what you might see a good Sobek player do is fight around those minions, maybe even group them up, just so he can get that guaranteed heal. So going into late game, these will fall off though. The healing of his 3 does go up late game, but it scales with power, which Sobek won't really have. Late game he will heal about 250 HP, which won't make too much of a difference because he's already tanking over 2000 or even more HP. His protections also fall off because the protections he gets are a flat amount, meaning that they don't scale. So he will still get 3 protections, which also won't make too much of a difference because he's also going to have over 200 protections, so that having that extra 30 is nice, but is not essential to him surviving. These are also just a few extra tips for that laning phase. So in solo lane, what you might see Sobek do is try to cancel your abilities with his 2 and with his 1. So if you are a god that has a channel ability like Bellona's 2, you must watch out because he's going to try to disrupt that. Also, if you are going to chase a Sobek and if he is low health, what a good Sobek player would do is he's gonna run to a jungle camp, or just like by passing by, he's going to use his 3 to heal off of that. So my tip number 2 would be watch out for Sobek's level 2, and I can't stress this enough. If it turns out that you are winning your lane in solo or duo, and you push your enemies into their tower, there's a big chance that when Sobek hits level 2, he will pull you straight into his tower. And trust me when I say this, this is the easiest way you can get first bloods. I do it all the time, and it happens to me all the time too. And no one ever expects a dash, especially if you are winning lane and you become level 2. You are most likely playing aggressive and trying to get that first blood. Just be careful that it doesn't happen to you. And even if you aren't a tower, there's still the chance he's going to pull you into his minions, into his ADC, and it's also a bad position you want to be in. So tip number 3, don't immediately run back into your team after getting pulled. So Sobek will use his dash for two things. The first one is initiation. Most teamfights start if Sobek blinks in or just dashes in and pulls one of your teammates into his team. If you happen to be this person, there are a few things you can do. You can straight away beat his dash and you're going to be safe. You have to be quick enough though, because the window is very, very short, and what happens a lot is that you beads during the air and your beads are just completely useless. If you do get pulled by a good Sobek, there's a very high chance you're going to get completely bursted by his team, unless somehow your team saves you. However, if you don't get immediately bursted, watch out for follow-up CC by the Sobek, because most Sobeks will use their tail whip after throwing you. And the first instinct of many people is, after getting pulled into a bad position, is to run back to their team. Even though this is a very good instinct, it will only follow up with you getting more CC, and might even cancel your jump or your dash in worst case scenario. So what you want to do is that, if you aren't already dead, is to run towards the enemy team or like sidestep to the side, bait out his tail whip, and then jump and dash away. Now obviously if your team is there to help, this might not be necessary because they might CC Sobek, granting you the opportunity to escape. So just keep your eyes open. However, a good Sobek will only pull you if you know that there's going to be follow-up damage by his team. So your best bet is to usually just beads, or maybe even pre-beads, so you can turn the tides around, which comes now into tip number 4. So tip number 4 would be that even though Sobek's dash is great to put people out of position, he himself also puts himself out of position. So if a Sobek hits or misses, it is a great opportunity to full-on burst him. What you have to watch out for is that nearly all Sobek players, if they hit or if they miss their dash, they are going to use their 2 to try to disrupt you so he can get away, or to maybe CC the person that got pulled. So what you want to do is that you want to distance yourself a little bit from him, so you're still in range to attack him, so you can still CC him, but you don't get knocked up. Now just watch out that he can still move while his 2, sure this is a short window, but he can still move while his 2 and knock you up unexpectedly. The Other Frost just released a video of how to pluck, so when to use that pluck for initiation, but also when to use that pluck for the PU and for defense. I'd highly recommend the video, it's really good. So you might be asking yourself, how do I counteract this? I don't want to get pulled into their tower, I don't want to get pulled into their team, what do I do? Well, luckily there's a few things that you can do. My first tip would be to stand in the minion wave. Remember, Sobek's 1 can only pull one enemy, and minions are included in that. So if you do stand the minion wave, and he does hit a minion, it gives you the perfect opportunity to burst him while he's still stuck in one place. Now, just remember that if he does dash, or if he just walks up to you in the minion wave, and he doesn't see the opportunity to pull you, he will probably use his 2 to try to disperse the minions to get a better angle to pull you. Now, if you don't have any minions, and you see that Sobek is walking up to you, and you know his dash is up, your best bet is to walk in unpredictable patterns to try to juke his 1. Or just to walk over to your team so you feel that extra safety. And there are also a few gods that kind of counter him. Jingwei, for example, can dash out of his pull. There's also a few gods like Anu or Ymir, which can actually block his pull by using their walls to block him off. And you can either do this in front of him or behind him. So if you see him walking towards you, as Anu, you can just put your pillar right in front of you and he's going to dash right into that. Sometimes you can also put the pillar behind him, that if he does pull you, you get thrown into the pillar instead of his tower. Ymir is also a great support player to counteract that, because if your ADC does get pulled, you have a big wall which you can just place up right behind him, so your ADC basically doesn't move at all, just hits your wall and is back to safety. So my 5th tip would be for assassins that are trying to dive the backline to try to kill that mage or that ADC. Just watch out for that Sobek. If a Sobek plays right and he stays with his damage dealers during a fight, it will be very hard for you to try to kill his mages and his ADCs. So if you do jump in or if you do blink in, just watch out what Sobek can do. Just remember, he can pull you back, he can knock you up, and he can even slow you. So my tip would be just wait until Sobek uses his ability, or if Sobek isn't paying attention, to then dive the back line. My sixth tip would be just to don't underestimate his ult. His ult can be used for a wide variety of things. The damage output can be very good. Base damage ranges up from anywhere from 300 to 950 damage, and late game that half hits mages and hunters. Obviously this won't always do 950 damage because you will have protections or other methods to avoid this damage. So even though the damage output of the ult is very good, most Sobek players won't use it for that reason. Most of the time they're going to try to use it for peel or for zoning. How they'll peel is that they're going to use their abilities to try to peel for their teammates with their 1, with their 2, even with their 3, and when those abilities are on cooldown, they're going to submerge into the ground, waiting for those cooldowns to come back up, whilst they can slow the enemy, whilst they have that extra protection. Sobek's ult is also great for zoning. Having that big radius with that slow and that damage is great for fighting around neutral objectives like the Gold Fury and the Fire Giant. It's also great for cutting off teammates for a teamfight like the Mage and the ADC who are scared to walk into that radius. So if you really want the objective steal, or if you want to help your teammates, just remember to always have an Aegis or a dash to get away so you don't take that damage. His ult is also great for chasing down enemies and securing that kill, but also for getting away. His slow definitely helps with chasing down enemies and that extra damage. What you'll usually do is, like I said before, he's going to try to use his combo, his 1, 2, maybe 3, and when you use your dash or jump, he's going to try to chase you down with his ult and with that slow. But if you do have your dash still up, you can still jump away pretty easily because it's pretty avoidable. If you don't, you just gotta hope your best with Aegis or something else. And for running away, he will also oftentimes use his ult because of that CC immunity and because he can slow you guys and because of those protections. Solo laners also love Sobek's ult. Because Manos plays such a crucial role in the solo lane, having that mana regeneration during his ult helps greatly with the lane. Especially because Sobek doesn't have a great clear. Most Sobek players won't have a problem with just ulting the wave to regain that mana and for clearing that wave. So there we have it, guys. Thanks for watching the video. Hope the tutorial helped. And Salty Scooter is submerging out.